good luck to you in your own race and all the other candidates that are here today. It's so important. This is an important election year for all of us. Jay, thank you for having me back, and I'm grateful to be here with you at Southwest Broward. Can't hear me? I've never been accused of being quiet. How's that? Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you for having me here today. I don't want to spend, I don't want to give you a long speech, but I want to give you an important one. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about the state, not just of our campaign, but of this election cycle and what it means. This is a confusing time for a lot of people in America. You look at all these major institutions that for so long have been so important in our country, and people are increasingly losing faith in all of them. You look at governments that, quite frankly, when they were run by Republicans or Democrats, oftentimes did not effectively deal with the issues of the time. You look at major institutions, some of the biggest names in banking and investment, and how they have failed. Some of the biggest companies in America who today are existing only because the federal taxpayers have bailed them out. Never in the modern history of our country has there been such a deficit in confidence in the major institutions of our land. It's important, however, to remind ourselves the source of America's greatness has never been these big companies. What made America great was never its government, was never its president or its congressmen or senators. What has made America great all these years is the constitutional commitment to limited government, to free enterprise, and to the individual, working collectively for the best interests of society. The reason why I start my speech with that is because that is what this election is about. Now, people out there are going to want to simplify these elections. They're going to say, well, this is an election between conservatives and liberals. Or this is an election between the people who support Barack Obama and the people who don't support Barack Obama. But it's not as simple as that. This election is a referendum on what kind of country this is going to be for your children and your grandchildren. That's what this election is about. We need to remind ourselves of what it has been for 230 some odd years. And it's very simple. If you want to describe America, I can describe America to you and what it has been over the last 230 some odd years in very simple terms. It is the single greatest society in the history of the world. That's what it is. Our history is not without blemishes. America hasn't made its mistakes. Is it perfect? Of course it's not perfect. Who is? But who would you rather be? What country in the history of mankind would you trade places with? And even today with the issues that we're facing, what country in the world would you move to instead of? And don't say Tahiti. That's not really a country. That's kind of a vacation destination. My point being is that this is the single greatest country in all of human history, largely because of two things. A system of limited government and a system of free enterprise that have allowed individuals to fulfill their God-given potential. You know, this is the one place on earth where it doesn't matter where your parents were born. It doesn't matter if you weren't born into the right family, if your parents couldn't afford to send you to Harvard or Yale. If you worked hard, if you played by the rules, and if you had the ability, you can accomplish anything in this great country because of our commitment to limited government and free enterprise. Now we're being asked to abandon that. Now understand, there have always been people in America that have not believed in the free enterprise system. They have wanted us to be more like Western Europe. They have wanted our government to provide more services and more guarantees. In essence, more of a welfare state. And when I say that, it's important to be clear. We are not anarchists. We understand that there is an important role for government. Government is important. It matters. It's not the most important institution in society. But we all want a government that works, that functions, that does its basic roles, and does them well. We believe in a safety net. Republicans believe in a safety net, not as a way of life, but a safety net that helps those who cannot help themselves, and helps those who have failed so they can stand up on their own 2 feet and try again. That's what we do. Much of the rest of the world chose something very different. They didn't choose a safety net. They chose a government that provided people cradle-to-grave services. Cradle-to-grave pre-K, cradle-to-grave child care, cradle-to-grave education, guaranteed housing, guaranteed insurance, all through the government. And the result is simple. Someone's got to pay for that. And the only way you can pay for that is by taking more money out of your economy. The only way you can pay for that is by giving more power over to your government and less power for yourself. Except that at some point, as Margaret Thatcher once said, you run out of other people's money. Your economy no longer grows fast enough to sustain what people expect from government. And then you have to start deficit spending. And when you start deficit spending, which basically means when you start borrowing money to spend money, you become Greece, and soon Portugal and Spain, and much of Western Europe. But yet there have always been those in American politics that believe that that model, the idea that somehow every time there is a problem in America or in our lives, let's turn to government and see what government can do to help us. They have always wanted that model for America. And right now what they are doing is they are using an economic downturn that has hurt a lot of people as an excuse to finally implement that type of economy here in America. What is happening in Washington, D.C. is nothing less than an effort to systematically redefine the role of government in America. And if we accept it, if we go down that path, if we continue down the road that we are on today, what will happen is not a mystery. America will have a sovereign debt crisis. In essence, we will no longer be able to sell our debt. People will no longer lend us money. That will eventually happen if things remain the way they are right now. If things remain the way they are right now, America will no longer be able to afford to be the strongest military power in the world. And I'll tell you why that matters. Because when America is the strongest military in the world is a safer place. And if we turn our lives over to our economy over to government increasingly, that nation that your parents love for you, that country that you work so hard to leave for your children and your grandchildren, that type of country will cease to exist. We will become indistinguishable from many of the countries around the rest of the world. So you know what this election is about? It's very simple. Do we want America to continue to be exceptional? Or are we prepared for her to become like everybody else? And that's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I desperately want America to be exceptional for my children and their children. And I know most people do too. And I'm running for the U.S. Senate because there's no one else running for it here in Florida who will say what I just said to you, much less do anything about it. The people I'm running against, to one degree or another, support some of the things that are happening in Washington today. That doesn't make them bad people, doesn't make them evil, but it makes them wrong. And the direction they advocate for America is one that I don't want to stand back and say I did nothing to try to stop. What we need now more than anything else is more voices in Washington, D.C. that will stand up to this agenda and offer in its place a clear alternative. An alternative that says that we must stop spending money we do not have. This country cannot continue to grow its debt. That we must return to an era of self and individual responsibility, where increasingly society, every time there's a problem, doesn't turn to some government program to solve it. Whatever happened to neighbors giving a neighbor a ride to the doctor instead of waiting for the government van to pick them up? Whatever happened to the community institutions that tightly knit our communities? Whatever happened to individual responsibility? Voices that stand up to this agenda and say that instead what we need is to return to an era of sane fiscal and tax policy. We have a tax code that's so complicated that even if you hire 10 accountants to fill out your return, you probably didn't do it right anyway. A tax code that discourages people from investing in the American economy. And last but not least, we need voices that understand that the world today is as unsafe and as dangerous as it has ever been. Radical Islamist terrorism is a threat as great as anything this country has ever faced. In fact, it is greater in many respects. Because the enemies we face today don't wear uniforms.